and welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. And on this very hot Monday in London, we are very thrilled to be joined by Maggie Stiefvater to talk about The Listeners. Hi Maggie, how's it going?
It's going very well, thanks for having me.
Good, good. I'm so pleased you could make it. It's the perfect day to be in London.
I am really happy that you guys are having a sunny day because I brought my sunglasses and my entire, 80% of my personality is wrapped up in them, and so when I don't have them on, I don't know who I am anymore, and so I can be myself in London. So thank you.
Perfect. We aim to please. So it makes I presume it makes packing a little bit of a nightmare because you're just like a scarf, gloves.
I brought everything I own.
Yes. Yeah. Fair enough. But yeah, we're very excited to have you here and to talk about your adult debut novel, which is crazy, but it's amazing. I had such a good time reading it, and it was one of those books where you finish it and you're just like, okay, what are you doing next? But we'll come to that. We'll come to that. So let's start off with the dreaded elevator pitch, because everyone loves those so much. If you had to kind of convince someone or tell everyone at home about what The Listeners is about, what would your elevator pitch be?
Mystical luxury hotel has to take on hundreds of Nazi diplomats.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Yes.
It's quite satisfying, actually, because I think a Stiefvater novel is defined by having a bad elevator pitch. It's very difficult to describe them. Yeah. And I do think, even saying that, it's not that it has a good elevator pitch. It has a succinct way that you can describe what the back of the book says. But every Stiefvater book is actually, it's about that, but it's also not about that.
Yes. And that's something that I particularly loved, because almost when you kind of, on the surface of it comes across, you think, oh, historical fiction, or this is a little bit different, and then you're just like, oh, okay. now we're getting into it. So very, very good. So this is obviously your adult debut. So how did your kind of approach to this differ to your other novels, like research and like even the ideas, like where did it all start?
So I knew I wanted to move into adult fiction probably in 2018, because everything I was reading had become adult fiction.
Yeah.
And I was changing, but also YA as a genre was changing. I really loved coming of age in YA, because you can be anything in YA. You can combine all genres, and there's no penalty for having magic or mystery or literary elements all thrown together. And the stakes were very low in YA when I got into it, which meant that you weren't even feeling that commercial press that came later. So I really loved coming of age in YA. But then as I looked around, I thought, I think it's time to move into adult. I wanted to know, where do I think in adult I belong?
Oh, okay.
Because adult obviously was also changing, but also because other YA authors were starting to age up, and they were all moving into the categories. But category fiction wasn't necessarily what I was reading. I was reading a lot of general fiction, but I wanted to know. So I took an entire year and I read the top 100 sellers across genres in adult over the past 100 years. Wow. And I removed the ones that had gotten big because of media or of a cultural moment. Okay. And it was really interesting, first of all, to see how easily you could tell what category a book belonged in within just a few pages. Okay. Where if I picked you up from your comfort zone in the bookstore and put you someplace else, even a literary omnivore, maybe especially a literary omnivore, could tell you exactly what section of the bookstore they're in because of conventions or the way time is used on the page or how characters are treated. And I was interested in that. I was also interested to see that they all had something wildly in common, which is that across all genres, they're very organized. If you're a top seller, they are very careful about the way they put the information on the page so that you're not doing any more work as a reader than you need to. And then you're allowed to have sophisticated thoughts or enjoy the story or to take on the emotional work of the book. And so that was such a learning experience to go and decide, okay, where do I want to be? I want to take something from this and something from this, and what's Stiefvater-y in that adult space. So that was my process of getting from YA to adult.
It's a lot more psychology. It's like a lot more kind of behind the scenes kind of. I suppose I've spoken to authors about this before, and obviously with their readership kind of aging up and stuff as well. Like you still kind of want to potentially keep those people kind of engaged, and so how do you kind of capture that?
Well, I had 4 heart attacks.
Oh.
4.5. Okay, so because
4.5.
when I reinvented myself here, I wanted to have this opportunity to go and say, can it be a real adult debut? Can it really be the kind of storytelling that I'm going to want to live in for the next 10 years? Knowing that many of my readers are going to be staying in pure category fiction.
Yeah.
And they may or may not be pleased by this. And then knowing that many of my readers might be moving into broader fiction, just omnivores, and they would also be happy with it. But I've spent 15 years of my career making sure that my fan base is as happy as they possibly can be. And so it was a very strange decision to go and say, am I going to do something that I think will give me more freedom to continue to build on top of this, but also might not be to everybody's taste if you're going to live in pure category. So that was quite daunting, I have to say. And I don't think that most YA authors made that choice. There would have been a version of me that could have just written my YA but with older characters.
Right. Yeah, and I suppose it's interesting as well, just thinking about the kind of the categorization and things of the bookstore itself, and kind of where you may want it to be positioned somewhere, but sometimes that choice is almost kind of taken away from you in a weird way. Have you seen, or obviously the listeners brand new, have you kind of seen your books in weird and wonderful sections of the bookstore and just been like,
I think my absolute favorite Weird and Wonderful place is I did see The Raven Cycle in YA nonfiction for a very long time. And I thought, it's a how-to guide of how to go to a magical school, a boarding school, and look for a dead king and do some rituals.
You kind of almost don't want to correct them.
I agree. I liked it right there. You know how you go into the bookstore sometimes and people have corrected it.
Yeah.
Right? They've phased out books, or they've taken books they don't like and they've turned them around.
Yes.
Well, I felt like the opposite in this case. All of my books should be in nonfiction.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I quite like that. And I do as well. I do quite often. We'll see the crafty authors coming in and facing out their books, but you're kind of.
It's not allowed. I have a strict policy. I feel like a bookseller knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? This is their territory. I get to rule this.
Yes.
Yes, and I feel like the booksellers get to rule their kingdom, and so it's not for me to doubt their kingdom ruling.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes there's reasons. So. Yeah. But and that's coming back to. That's crazy about the health things. That must really kind of switch you. What am I doing? Like, was it something like a hereditary thing? Was it kind of stress related? Was it just something completely out of the blue that really just kind of
my health?
Yeah.
It's very genetic. I definitely get autoimmune from my father's side of the family, but autoimmune is really common now. And so it was really interesting that if I had gotten sick, because it sounds very dramatic, but it was dramatic. I collapsed on tour. Shoveled up and taken back home again. And I'd been getting sicker and sicker, and I'd seen endless doctors who had told me that they thought I had panic disorder, which was really interesting to be a woman who was working at the top of the game at the time. And I mean, I was racing cars.
Yes.
I had all of these markers of physical and financial success, and yet I could still sit in front of a doctor, and they would look at me and they would say, I think you have panic disorder. I'm like, my hair is falling out. Like, women sometimes get really upset. And it was amazing to think, to think, just if that's what you're looking at me. And my agent said, here, please look at Maggie, because we really have a vested interest in her being alive.
Yeah.
And they couldn't come up with anything better. Imagine every other woman sitting in front of who is trying to, any other marginalized person sitting in front of a doctor trying to get it. So it was really interesting. But what I was going to say is that I turned out to have, at the time it was uncommon, but not incredibly uncommon, autoimmune disease, and very fixable, very treatable. But now there's so many more diagnoses because they're very environmental factors that are triggering them in people who are genetically inclined, especially in the US. We have a lot of it going on, which means that now if I went and walked into an endocrinologist and said, look, these are my symptoms, they would have immediately said, oh, right, this is your problem. You don't make this and you don't make this. We're going to give it to you and you're going to revive like a plant. And so it was It was wild. It also happened during COVID. And it's interesting about this novel is that I came up with the concept of this novel, a hotel book, in COVID. But I was very certain I didn't want to write a COVID book because I was sure everyone was going to be writing about their experiences, metaphorically, of lockdown. And it turns out my experience of lockdown was very different as well, because while everyone else's lives were being taken away, 2019 was when my organ damage finally healed. And I got my brain back. Yeah. And so in 2020, everyone else's worlds got smaller and I became myself again. So it was a very strange experience where I felt like the engine was running, but we couldn't get in gear. We couldn't get out.
Yeah, goddamn. I mean, that definitely comes across in the book. There is that element of hope that you read in the book. And even though obviously there's crazy stuff going on, and obviously it's wartime, and no one quite knows what the next day is going to bring. You have all these, such an interesting cast of characters who are, kind of knocking off against each other, and different things are happening, but there is so much hope in there. And I think that probably speaks to like what you were going through. But wow,
I think I'm inherently an optimistic person.
Yeah.
My teenage self would be unhappy with this. I dressed in black all the time. Definitely would have thought of myself as a pessimist back then, but I think I must be the other way. I think I must be inherently optimistic. And the more people I meet, I have to say, the more I like people, which that seems like the opposite of what most people do. I don't know. I feel like most people, and this is definitely a part of the book, I feel like most people have two selves. They have the self that they have to inhabit the world with, and most people are not quite conscious of how they come off. And then there's their true self. And it's very difficult to ever meet that true self. Even a family member, maybe especially a family member, can't meet that true self. And so when I was interviewing luxury hoteliers for this, it was so interesting because they read me for filth. Like they were like carnival tricks. And I feel like I'm a quite inscrutable person, and yet they could see the soul of me quite easily. And I thought, oh, this is the reason why you're the best of the best. I mean, one of these guys I interviewed was a luxury hotelier. He ran a property in Switzerland that went for $54,000 a night. And so they were just exemplars of luxury. And it really was, their game was knowing people on just that incredibly basic level. And I think the older I get, the more tolerant I get of going into saying, okay, that's not actually you. Like I'm sleeping, this is very unpleasant what you're giving to me right now, but that's not actually you. I'm taking that away. We're going to see what the essential self is. And most people's essential self is much nicer actually than what they give to the world.
Yeah, no, definitely. God, did you get to stay in any of the fancy hotels on the?
I stayed at the Bedford Spa, but actually it was a London hotel that inspired me to write a hotel book. Okay. It was the Gore,
right? Okay,
Kensington, and my publisher had put me up there, and every single room was different, which was very appealing. But most inspiring about it was at the time that I was staying there, it felt like everyone who was staying there had a capital letter profession. I was the author, and there was an attorney and an explorer, and every single time we had this conversation, it was this big capital letter conversation. So you're all operating at the top of our game, and it was just such a singular experience, so memorable that I thought, oh yeah, we're gonna hope a hotel book. That's definitely what's going to be what's on the slate.
God, that almost sounds like the start of Clue or something,
And then one of us was murdered.
Yes, exactly. So kind of coming back to the listeners, and also obviously your backlist. So I suppose there's some similar themes and kind of topics in your books, and there's, it's kind of great to obviously see them in here. You've got the kind of the found family, you've got the kind of the different generations, and the different kind of the upper, the middle, the kind of lower class. What themes do you particularly enjoy exploring in your books?
Again, positivity is so unbelievable to my goth self. Years ago, I was talking to my audiobook narrator, my longtime audiobook narrator, Will Patton, and it was for the very last book of the Dreamer trilogy, so the spin-off of the Raven Cycle. I like that you've made this beautiful thing so I can spin off of this. And I said, wow, I think you read 1 million of my words into a microphone. And he said, I think so. And he said, he showed me his manuscript from what he was reading the last one. It's all marked up with everything he's performing.
Yeah.
And then he said, I was already feeling a hangover that this was the last book, so I went into the bookstore and I went looking to see if I could find another book like yours. I went to the YA section, and I really liked the idea of Will Patton, very particular kind of actor, standing in the young adult section in 2019. And I said, did you find what you were looking for there, Will? And he goes, I don't think that's where most of your books are. It wasn't like that. And he went on to talk about it, and he said he only reads for three authors total. So he reads for me, he reads for Stephen King, and he reads for Bukowski. And I don't like to think too hard about that Venn diagram.
I mean, that's an interesting mix.
Right. And he said, you are kind of like King, where both of you turn the world just a little bit off of normal. But when King does it, it pushes us to our shadow selves. It makes the world, like, it pushes us to the brink. And when you do it, you're inviting us to wonder, to make people better. And so it's like the opposite of horror, wonder. And I thought that's it. That's the theme, I think, because when I was a kid, I grew up reading all of those wonderful series with magic in them that just, it went away when you became an adult. Narnia closes off, or they forget everything at the end of The Darkest Rising. I mean, just fill in the blanks. And that's not been my experience of adulthood at all. So people often ask me, since I've been on tour for this, if I can still think of the listeners as wonder because it has Nazis in it. And I would argue it has to have Nazis in it for it to be wonder, because otherwise it's just a fable. If you remove everything that's horrible in the world and say, look, isn't it great? Well, of course it's great, and no one believes it. So if you really want to bring us to that sense of, oh, the world is terrible, and yet you can carve out these moments of wonder inside it, you've got to have the terrible things in there.
That's so interesting. And just thinking about that kind of that fairy tale idea, because obviously the main character, like Hoss, like you almost feel like she is spinning the tale in a way, that she's almost like I don't know how to describe her, like almost like, you know, the ringmaster or something, that everything's kind of under her control to a degree, like even the people in it visiting the hotel. So.
She was kind of a terrifying character to write because she's so good at the outside presentation that it's very difficult to know the true her. And that's the entire book in many ways, is that she thinks that she's immune to luxury because no one really knows her. And in many ways, she doesn't really know herself. So that being the true heart of the story means that I feel like I'm asking the reader for the patience to go and say, okay, she's shouting about who she really is, but you have to, it's not the real thing. But I loved the nickname Hoss. I am from Virginia, which is right next to West Virginia where this is. You can throw a rock into West Virginia. I wouldn't, because West Virginia will throw it back harder, but still, could see the West Virginia mountains from my house. And we are very proud of one of our musicians, Patsy Cline.
Right, yes.
And I remember as a kid, I read that she could drink like a man and that she called everyone Hoss.
Yeah.
And I just remember this forever. I don't know. It was so delightful to me. And so when I was coming up with June and building her, I just thought, yes, this is her name. This is what they call her.
Yes, yeah. And she's such kind of an interesting kind of lead character / protagonist, because she's not, you can't put her in a box in a way. You can't say, oh, she is this, because she, I don't know, she seems to be able to kind of change. And it's something about, like you were saying about the kind of hotels knowing everything that they need to know, like, but quietly knowing everything that obviously she does. So
readers often ask me how I build my characters, and I say I steal from real life, but I don't steal an individual so often as I steal the shape between people. So if you have a friend group, you don't need to steal the aesthetics of them. If you have your mother, stealing your mother is a very boring trait, but if you steal the way that your mother deals with her sister, then suddenly you have an interesting specific shape. So it was very interesting, because one of the reasons why June is so unknowable is because she doesn't interact with other people in an honest and truthful way. So you can't ever see her until she really, and not to spoil it, until she really starts getting close to other characters and is herself, and suddenly you start to see. And even then, I think it's so lightly expressed because she's still learning who she gets to be when she's not performing.
And there's some very interesting kind of moments, obviously, where you get kind of a little bit of kind of her origins, just a little kind of, you know, not enough to kind of, you know, like, oh well, it's because of this, but enough to be like, oh okay, yeah, just try and like breadcrumbs, like piece it all together. But yeah, such an interesting character. So obviously you mentioned about the kind of characters in the world. What kind of surprised you most whilst you were writing the book? Was there a particular character who totally changed from when you kind of first thought about them, or was there something in the world that just completely spun on its axis?
There were two things. One is that when I was doing the research, the stories were absolutely outrageous, and so any one of them could have been the center for this book. And so even the story that I ended up really circling about it was based on a true story of a military attaché for Germany who ended up having to make an under the table deal with the State Department to keep his 16-year-old son in the US. He'd just been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Wow. And even though the military attaché technically represented Germany, his country, he knew that if he brought his son home with him, that he would be killed. And so these kinds of ethical decisions just floored me again and again. So that surprised me, and how to treat them tenderly and truthfully and not flippantly in fiction. And then in the writing, there's a character named Pennybacker, the State Department man, and he is a very bumbling, and he's just supposed to be the guy who's running the operation there, and he existed only to tell June about how things ran. I mean, there was really a State Department guy there as well, but so in Pennybacker goes, and this is obviously supposed to be a gentle love story between June and Tucker with the specter of Gilfoyle in the background. And yet when I wrote this draft, somehow it kept on seeming like June was going to run away into the hills with Pennybacker. And I'm going, what is happening here? Is it because Pennybacker is such a good last name? Is that what it is? And I kept on changing Pennybacker to make him less appealing. I made him sweaty. I made the dogs not like him. Yes. I made the other FBI agents not want to sit with him. I made him balding, not bald, but balding, which is an important distinction. We don't like the in-betweens. I gave him a bow tie. I made it always crooked, and every single thing I stacked against him, it just made June look like she had so much hidden depth because she was suddenly realizing that this man that even the other agents wouldn't sit with was true partner. And I just thought, this is impossible. What is happening? I made him older. I gave him a wife. It was awful. And I realized finally that it actually wasn't anything that Pennybacker was doing. It was because of the order I introduced them in. The very first time they all sat down at the conference table to tell them what's going on. There's Tucker, who was supposed to be the beginning of the romance. And every single time Tucker appeared in the manuscript, my very buttoned up agent would write hot. I'm not sure if he is, but she hot. I'm like, he's standing there. The bar is so low. So this very first moment that I introduced him, June sees him and she thinks hot. And that is what did it wrong. Because we all know the rom-com trope, right? Like you meet the guy and he won't even play with the lame guy who's bad at sports, right? The dogs won't pet, and he's Gaston, right? Yeah. And then a couple of pages later, here comes Pennybacker, and they have a real conversation about how to run the hotel. I mean, the worse I made Pennybacker, the more obvious it was. So all I had to do was go and unhot Tucker, and it was fixed. But
that's so just an agent coming in just saying, hot.
It was very nerve-wracking because my editor also she does things longhand. So she read the manuscript and then she said, "I'll FedEx it to you." I said, No, don't FedEx scan. She goes, "Oh, it's already in the mail. It'll be fine." I'm like, well, it won't be fine. It won't be fine. I once had an entire truckload of blue lily blue that was headed out to stores, and the entire UPS truck spilled on the interstate and spilled copies of blue lily blue across the interstate. And I just thought, my manuscript that you've edited by hand, hot, is coming to me. Anyway, they made it. It's fine.
Oh my god, that's so. Like in these times, like it's so nerve-wracking to be waiting for the mail.
I agree.
Like, oh, I don't know.
And it was a red pen. It was properly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I mean, I get nervous sometimes when we send off book plates to the US, and then sometimes you're just like, did you get them? It's just like, I don't know.
Now imagine it was your only copy ever.
Yes, exactly. And just trying to kind of remember, I know I was talking to a friend of mine recently, Laura Sebastian, who's also a YA author, and she was saying how she was working on one of her books, and she had gone out of the country, she was on tour, and she left her laptop on the thing in the back of the plane, and got off the plane, blah 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 blah, and then was just like, oh crap, because that's my only, and I had, it doesn't, this was possibly a few years ago, so I don't know whether the clouds and stuff was a thing, but it was very like, am I going to get it back? And she decided to sit down and try to start rewriting it, assuming that she was never going to see that again. Luckily, very luckily, someone actually found it and handed it in.
Was her new version better?
So, well, this is the thing. She was just like, oh, I think I've got it. And then when she read it back, she was just like, I don't got it. like it's just, and thank God, like 2 days later, they just like, oh, we found it. Oh my God. Because you're just like, and I think she was obviously on deadline, like a week or 2 weeks to deadline. So she's just like, I remember the gist, kind of thing. Like, I'll just write the gist. But yeah,
that's a horrible story. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. Yeah, very, very nightmare fuel. I think so. Yeah. Now we have to obviously talk about, and again, like, try not to spoil anything too much out there, but that one of the really kind of fantastical elements, the Sweetwater. So where did that idea come from, and how did you manage to? Because it almost kind of ebbs and flows in the novel itself. Like it's but not
good pun, strong word.
I've had my caffeine. But it's not kind of the thing you said earlier about like horror and wonder. That so easily could have become something quite horrific. So yeah, how did you balance that?
Interestingly, people ask me after this if I've read The Shining, and I have a long time ago. Okay. And then as soon as I thought about that, I thought, oh, and that's solid horror entry. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's true that the uncanny can often be quite horrific. But I think also, have you ever seen a ghost?
I don't know. I've definitely like heard noises, and so, and sometimes when you think you see like a shadow, but I couldn't 100% say yes. Because
I've been haunted.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it's interesting when you meet people who are haunted. The people who are most, my husband has not.
Mm.
The people who are most afraid of ghosts are the people who have never seen them.
Ah, okay.
And so I think June's understanding of the water is how trusting we feel of it.
Mm.
And so it doesn't actually get quite frightening until we think that June might not know everything about it, and then it gets eerie. But when I was working on it, that was the part that I was most interested in thinking about how I was balancing it. And it's very interesting to be having this conversation here in the UK, because I think from all of my time in the UK that fiction here has a much nicer understanding of how to handle magic and myth. And we don't have the same tradition in the US, which means it always gets quite othered. It feels fantasy very quickly. And so the magical element has to be so much smaller for it to still be considered general fiction.
Right.
Has to be, I always say it's the rule of the ghost. You can have one ghost then it starts to be fantasy. So when I first started doing it, first of all of the real hotels in these detentions were spa hotels for the most part. So they really were on top of springs.
Yes.
And then I was reading, I'm such a wide net while researching, and I was reading a collection of 19th century letters about the hot springs, and was someone who had driven all the way from Washington, D.C. deep into these mountains and described all of them. And it's very boring, in case you're wondering. But there was one letter where he talked about at a hidden spring in West Virginia that there was a place where the hot spring and the cold spring emerged so close to each other that if you lay down between them, and you could put your hand in each of them at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And he said, but you wouldn't lay down between them because there was delicate, beautiful moss between them, and it was covered with hundreds of beautiful snails. And when I saw that, I thought, that's my magical element, is the water. And then anybody who's read any of my other books knows that I love me some mirror magic. I really love intention, and I really love magic as myth. And so this idea that the water will give you what you give it just felt like that's what her hotel staff does.
Yeah.
June is trying to control them. She's trying to control the water. And the changes are subtle, but once it's turned, you know when the room's mood has changed.
Yes, yeah. It's like almost like a constant kind of battle, isn't it? Because you can kind of see the water turning at certain points, and then it's just like, okay, how are we gonna? But yeah, it's fascinating. It's just such an interesting kind of interesting, almost like a character, like another character in the book. But yeah, it's so good. So coming towards the end of our interview today, so you're on kind of towards the end of your tour, so you've got your UK dates and stuff.
But on the beginning of the UK
the beginning
tour,
of
the end of my US, but the adventure is just beginning.
The adventure has just begun. What are you most looking forward to doing in the UK?
Gosh, well, we have a car, so we get to drive it. That's nice.
That
so we get to. The thing I like best is I've been to the UK so many times. I've started coming 15 years ago, and for the last 3 years I locked hundreds of writers into Scottish castles, and we stripped down their personality and built new ones for them. We made a cult, we made them stronger, faster, better. And so I just would spend entire months here. And the thing that I like the best about it is that I feel like I no longer come here as a tourist, I come here as a friend instead. So no longer feel that press of having to go and pack your eyes full of things. Instead, you can park a car and you go and drive and you walk to you can revisit favorite cafes, or you can go to favorite bits of art and poke at it. And there's that lack of urgency that is nice, but it's still that grandparent thing where it's not my home, which means that I can just give it back at the end of the day. I also don't have to do work in the same way here. I mean, obviously I'm touring, but I'm not going to turn in a manuscript. I'm not going to pick up my phone and talk to my plumber or whatever. So it's an agreeable pause, I think. So what am I most looking forward to? I've never been to York, unbelievably. I've been to Yorkshire.
Okay, but York.
But I've never been actually to the city of York, and I was a medieval history major, so I feel like.
So you're off to the Viking Museum.
I have my marching orders. We'll see. There's not a lot of time in between the various things because it's a lot of driving.
Yes. Yeah, that is the one thing of it we were talking about off camera is driving and trying to park in this country is it will eat into your time.
Yes.
So yeah, sometimes it's almost worth parking somewhere else and getting a train from one city to another.
Agreed. Correct.
Just to do that.
But I'm also looking forward to. It's been forever since I've been here to sign things, and so I get to see people. I don't think I've been here since the Dreamer trilogy, for instance, and so just to see humans.
Yes, see real people. Because you must, I suppose, with authors as well. That obviously you go into your little kind of caves to work, and then it's you actually get to.
And this was a very deep cave for this one.
Yeah.
Years.
Years. A lot of, but well worth the wait. It was exquisite. It was so good. So we have to kind of end the interview with what are you working on next, and then also what are you currently reading, watching, and if you game, what are you playing?
I am working on my next adult novel, which I can't say a lot about, except I'm obsessed with it. And it will be headline again.
Okay.
And when I was writing this one, I really wanted to have a piece that would show what I was trying to do, to shift to.
Okay.
And it was a hard break with what the priorities of before. But I knew that as I was writing this, that by necessity, because of the historical moment, I had one hand tied behind my back, because I feel like what makes a Stiefvater novel is the friend group of people. And so I promised myself that my next one was going to be an idea that just absolutely showcased a brand new friend group. And so I am obsessed with them. And I did just share the first quarter with my editor and agent, and they are deliciously obsessed with the people in it. So it's nice to have that kind of obsession working on it. On a plane over, I finished reading Rob McFarlane's Is a River Alive? And I didn't know I had tear ducts until I read it. Apparently I do. I don't know. I just think it's such a good non-fiction companion to the Raven cycle. I feel like the way that he talks about the natural world and mysticism is very matchy. And then gaming, am I gaming with anything right now? I'm not really. I love racing games, of course. And they still have not yet come out with one that matches my favorite, which is Need for Speed.
Okay.
But
one day,
yeah.
They keep revisiting kind of, like the pre-existing like older franchise and suddenly going like.
The thing is that it's not right. I know that they have beautiful games now with great. It's just like driving a car. But here's the thing: I can actually drive a car.
Yes.
And I've actually raced cars as well, so it's fine. But do you know what? Even better than Need for Speed is there's a game which you will have not heard of probably. It's called Crazy Taxi.
Oh no, I've heard of Crazy
Oh
Taxi.
yeah, and that is actually the best one. Right down to it's got the quality glitches where you've done it perfectly and you've gone to pick up your fare and you're right there, but it glitches and puts you someplace completely different, and the music stops, and it's marvelous. This is what gaming should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, there is something about I was talking about this a few weeks ago, the Oblivion remake. So my other half is a games designer, and he writes for Pathfinder amongst other things. And he picked up the Oblivion remake, and I think I was on like a call or on a meeting, and he was just like, "God, this is janky as it was like 15 years ago." He's like, "My horse has disappeared and stuff," and he was just like, "There's something annoying but also quite lovable."
It is. It's like a dream space. It's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, your part of your body will just disappear, or you'll clip through a wall, and like you do in life.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah. And anything you're watching currently? Is there anything?
I just finished watching The Pit.
Oh.
My dad is an ER doctor,
okay.
And so I have a high tolerance for, I would say, medical things, but I wasn't going to watch it except for everyone said it was like old-fashioned TV, and I said, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And what was interesting is that when you watch it, it's because it puts together a group of people in such an interesting way that you don't know what the arc of the series is going to be.
Okay.
But any given moment is going to be interesting because they've just done their work of the homework, the groundwork. And then I read something that said that it was just competency porn. And I thought, oh, that is what it is. That's all The Pit is about. It's about people knowing how to do their job. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I want to see. I want to see people doing their job. Good job. Yeah.
That's a good phrase. I'm just thinking anything that, say MasterChef, the professionals, when you're watching actual like Michelin starred chefs, just a day at work for them. It's just like, oh, it's riveting stuff.
Yes.
So.
Headline did an amazing video, which was they showed this being made.
Yes.
And so it is 2 minutes of it just going through its factory, being embossed and stamped and turned. And I watched it 3 times and I thought, why am I watching this? It's the same thing. Like, it's just everything is doing its job. Look at that. Yeah. Just look at that.
Yeah, it's something so pleasing about seeing.
It's that, but with Noah Wiley.
Yeah, basically, which is a good hit. So yeah, I don't think I've seen him in anything. Not since ER, surely.
He has been in a billion things that I haven't seen.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a huge television watcher, so I should have said that before The Pit. I'm a big film watcher. I just saw the latest Wes Anderson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it good?
It is good, except for the thing with Wes Anderson is he always feels like a cautionary tale. He's so good and controlled, and as I get older and older as a creator, I really love intentionality.
Yes.
But it always comes at the cost of raw emotion. The more you sense as a reader or a viewer that everyone's controlling everything, the less afraid you feel on that visceral level.
Yes.
So it's a very safe watch where you watch it and just think everything is so beautiful to my eyes, everything is so intentional, but you feel it's all in the head, it's not in the heart.
Oh, yeah.
But it's because we're behind this book. I should say Grand Budapest Hotel is his best.
Really. Oh, actually, one, yes. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I think, we'll be going to see 28 Years Later at the weekend, so that's a very different vibe.
This makes me sound like I'm a lot more snotty than I think I really am. I'm reading this wonderful nonfiction and I just saw Wes Anderson.
Yeah. I mean, that is a vibe.
Just saying, that might be the outside shell, the inside shell.
Well, thank you, Maggie, so much for joining us today. And for anyone at home, we're going to have a whole heap of signed copies of The Listeners and some of Maggie's other books available to pre-order on our website, or pop into any of our 10 branches and you can grab a signed copy. But we shall see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.